Your brother has always needed more, my mom excused after excluding me in her will. I cut off her monthly payments. Now she's begging. I'm 28 years old. I work at a consulting firm downtown helping businesses find their feet in an ever-changing market. On the surface, things are fine. I have my job, a small apartment, and a social circle that I can rely on. But there's one thing that always looms over my life: my family. Growing up, I always felt like I had to fight for a piece of my mom's attention. It wasn't that Barbara, my mother, was neglectful in the typical sense. She wasn't cold or distant, but there was always a certain emotional disconnect. For as long as I could remember, my younger brother James was the center of her world. He was always the one who needed more attention, more nurturing, more everything. James had this way of drawing people in. From a young age, he had perfected the art of being the helpless one in the family. He wasn't a troublemaker, but he knew exactly how to manipulate situations to his advantage. All he had to do was show a little vulnerability, act like he needed help with something, and boom, he'd have mom wrapped around his finger, and she always fell for it. I didn't have the same luxury. I wasn't helpless. I was the responsible one. While James would skip school, sleep in late, or refuse to contribute to anything at home, I was the one holding everything together. I was the one who made sure I stayed on top of my grades, who helped out with the housework, who got a job at 16 to start saving for college. But none of that seemed to matter to Mom. I wasn't the problem kid, so I never needed extra attention. I never needed to be coddled. James, on the other hand, seemed to need everything. And Mom was always there to give it to him. Even when he got older and started to rely on her more and more, she never stopped being his safety net. I can still picture those moments in our house when James would wander into the kitchen, looking pitiful with his hoodie pulled over his head, and without fail, Mom would be there. "What's wrong, sweetie? Are you okay?" Even if nothing was wrong, he knew how to make it seem like it. He didn't have a job, didn't pay rent, didn't do much of anything, but he knew how to play the role of the eternal child. And somehow that was enough to make Mom feel like he was the one who needed all of her energy. Then there was me. I tried to make Mom proud by excelling at school, by becoming financially independent, by helping out at home. I thought I was doing all the right things. I thought that if I just kept doing my part, she'd notice. I thought that if I helped her with money, if I sent her a little more each month to cover her bills, then I would earn her approval. But that never seemed to be the case. Mom was always so grateful for the money I sent her, but it never felt like it was truly about me. It felt like it was about keeping the peace, about doing what I was supposed to do as the good daughter. I sent her money every month, even though I was barely scraping by myself. I was juggling student loans, bills, a full-time job, and still I always found a way to make sure I could send money home. But it wasn't the same kind of gratitude I saw when James was around. There was no real appreciation for what I was doing, it was just expected. As time went on, I began to notice more and more that I was being taken for granted. And it wasn't just about the money, it was about everything. I was the one who was always expected to sacrifice, to do what no one else would. And James, he never had to lift a finger. He was the lost soul, the one who couldn't quite make it in life, the one who needed saving. At first, I didn't mind too much. I loved my mom and I wanted to help her. But as the years went by, I began to feel like I was just a means to an end. I was a financial lifeline, a safety net, but not someone who was truly seen or valued. Things started to take a darker turn when I began noticing how much control James was gaining. I always knew he had a way with Mom, but it wasn't until I really started paying attention that I realized just how deep his influence over her ran. He was using her for everything. He had figured out how to manipulate her so well that it was almost sickening. It wasn't just emotional manipulation anymore, he was now pulling the strings of her financial decisions. I would hear him ask her for money under the guise of needing it for something important. Sometimes it was for a car payment. Other times it was to help pay off a debt that he couldn't manage on his own. And every time, without fail, Mom would give it to him. She'd either write him a check or hand him cash without asking a single question. I'll never forget the time I found out he had asked Mom to help him buy a new car. A brand new car. Not a cheap one either, something flashy, something he didn't need. And she handed him the money without hesitation, despite the fact that her bills were piling up and she had been asking me for extra money to cover her utilities. I was furious, not just because he was asking for something so extravagant, but because Mom had no boundaries. She had become so blinded by his manipulations that she didn't even see what was happening. She was giving him money for everything while I was left on the side, barely scraping by and still expected to keep giving. And then, it hit me, James wasn't just manipulating her for small things. He was manipulating her for big things. I started seeing how he was controlling the family finances, how he was setting the tone for every financial decision Mom made. He was always in charge, always the one who dictated what they spent. I could see how he had started to condition her to make her feel guilty for saying no. He would say things like, "I'm your son, Mom, I need you," or "I don't know what I'd do without you," and that was all it took. She couldn't say no to him. She couldn't stop herself from giving him whatever he wanted. And that's when I started to feel the real weight of what had been happening all along. I wasn't just being ignored or undervalued. I was being used. My mother was using me to fund a lifestyle that allowed James to stay dependent and lazy. She wasn't helping him grow up, she was enabling his immaturity. And in doing so, she had created a monster, a manipulative, entitled person who would never learn to stand on his own feet. I started to feel like I had been nothing more than a cash machine, just an extension of her financial lifeline, and James was the one who got all the attention and all the love. Then came the moment that changed everything. I was over at the house one afternoon, helping Mom go through some old files she had stored in the attic. We were going through boxes of bills, receipts, and tax papers when I came across something that made my stomach drop: her will. It was completely unexpected. I didn't even know she had updated it, but there it was, her name boldly scrawled at the top of the page. I skimmed through it at first, thinking it was just another old draft or something irrelevant, until I saw the words, "All assets, including property and savings, shall be transferred to my son, James." My heart sank, I couldn't breathe. What the hell? She had left everything to him. Everything. The house, the savings, all the money she had been getting from me every month, all the sacrifices I'd made for her, everything was for James. I felt a cold rush of anger mixed with a deep, aching sense of betrayal. How could she do this to me? How could she choose him, the one who had done nothing to deserve it? The one who had never shown any ambition, any care for anyone except himself. I closed the will and shoved it back into the box as if by doing so I could erase the reality of it. But I couldn't. The words haunted me. I was suddenly filled with a mix of rage and hurt, like I was suffocating under the weight of all the years I had spent trying to make things work for us, for a family that didn't even see me. The days that followed felt like I was walking through a fog. I couldn't stop thinking about the will, about how everything I had worked for, every sacrifice I had made, meant nothing. It wasn't just the financial side of it. It was the fact that my mother had chosen James over me, over everything we had shared, every moment I had believed we were close. She had let him manipulate her for years, and I had been so blind to it. I felt like a fool. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much of our relationship had been built on lies. Well, maybe not lies, but certainly on things unsaid. My entire life I had believed that I was doing the right thing by helping her, that it was my duty as her daughter to support her, to be the good, responsible one. I never questioned why I was the only one doing it. I never questioned why I was always the one to pick up the slack, to be the stable force in our family. But now I couldn't stop questioning everything. Every phone call with Mom felt strained now. When I spoke to her, all I could think about was how she had been blind to James's manipulation, how she had never once acknowledged what I had done for her. Every time she called to thank me for sending money or helping out with something, it felt like a slap in the face. It wasn't that I didn't want to help her, it was that it felt like she didn't even care about what I had done. She didn't even realize how much I had given, how much I had sacrificed to keep everything running, to make her life a little easier. I knew deep down that I had to confront her, but I couldn't shake the fear. I had always tried to be the good daughter, the one who kept things together. I had never been the rebellious one. I was the one who always did what was expected of me. And now everything felt like it was falling apart. How could I confront my own mother? How could I accuse her of something that deep down I had always feared was true, that she loved James more than me? That everything I had done for her was nothing more than an obligation in her eyes. That evening I called her. My hands were shaking as I dialed the number. The phone rang for what felt like an eternity before she finally picked up. "Hello?" Her voice was warm, familiar, but it felt distant somehow. "Hi, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head, wondering what this was about. "What's going on, Ashley?" she finally asked, her tone changing slightly, sensing the seriousness in my voice. "I found the will, Mom," I said, my voice coming out in a rush. "I know about James." The words hit the air with the weight of a ton of bricks. I could feel the tension in the room immediately. My heart was racing, but I pushed on. "I don't understand," I continued. "Why him? After everything I've done for you, I've been supporting you, helping out every month, and you've left everything to him. Why?" For a long moment there was silence. I could hear her breathing on the other end, but she didn't say anything. It felt like hours passed, but finally she spoke. "Ashley," she started slowly, almost as if she were choosing her words carefully. "James has always needed more. He's always been lost. I've tried to give him everything I can. He's not like you. You've always been so strong, so independent. You've never needed me the way he does." The words hit me like a slap. "What do you mean, he needs you more?" I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. "I've always been here for you, always tried to make your life easier. But it's never been enough. You've never really seen me, have you? It's always been about James. Everything I've done for you, all the sacrifices I've made, it's never been enough." There was another long pause. "I didn't mean for it to be like that," she said quietly. "I never meant for you to feel like this." "Well, that's the problem, Mom. You didn't mean for it to happen, but it has. You've let him manipulate you, and I've been here giving everything I have to make up for his laziness. And now you've left him everything, everything." I could feel the anger rising within me, but I tried to keep my voice calm. Why have you done this?" "I don't know," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I guess I've just been blinded by my own guilt. I've been trying to make up for all the things he's lost, and I didn't see how much you were doing for me. I didn't realize." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My whole life I had tried to do what was right, tried to be the daughter she needed me to be, and now she was telling me she didn't even see it. I had been invisible to her. Everything I had given was just, expected, nothing special, just a job I had to do because it was my duty. I didn't know what to say to that. I was torn between wanting to scream at her to tell her how wrong she was and wanting to cry because I knew deep down she would never understand. She would never truly see me, not the way I needed her to. "I have to go, Mom," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need some space. I need to figure out what to do next." The line went quiet and I could hear her sobbing softly on the other end, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I couldn't. I hung up, feeling a weight lift off my chest, but also a deep sense of loss. I had just confronted my mother, but in doing so, I had also lost her. There was no going back after this. I was done being the invisible daughter. It was time to take control of my life. My emotions swirling, I realized something else. This wasn't just about the will. It wasn't just about James. It was about me finally standing up for myself. It was about me learning that I was worth more than just being the family's financial support. It was about learning to love myself enough to let go, and that was the hardest thing of all. The days after the confrontation felt like I had just stepped off a cliff. My mind was in constant chaos. I had finally said the words I needed to say, the words I had kept bottled up for so long. But the moment they left my mouth, I felt an emptiness take over me, like I had just severed a lifeline that I had been holding on to for years. For a brief moment, I almost regretted what I had done. But deep down, I knew I couldn't go back. That's when I made the decision to stop. I called my bank and froze the automatic transfers I had set up for my mom. It felt like the hardest thing I had ever done, but at the same time, it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I was stopping the cycle that had kept me in a place where I was only valued for what I could provide. It was the hardest thing to do because I felt guilty, like I was abandoning her. but the guilt started to fade once I realized that I had been abandoning myself all along. I couldn't explain to anyone how much it hurt. To walk away from someone you've spent your whole life trying to help, trying to make proud, was a pain that cut deeper than any betrayal I had ever known. I had always believed that family was everything, but I had to face the fact that sometimes family can hurt you the most. As I distanced myself, I began to focus more on my own life. It felt like I was waking up from a long slumber. There was so much I had neglected, the things I loved, the things that made me happy. It was like I had spent all these years just going through the motions, doing what I thought I had to do. But now I started to rediscover myself. I took up painting again. It had been something I had loved as a child, but somewhere along the way I had stopped. I guess I didn't have time for it. I didn't have the energy. But now, with the weight of my responsibilities finally lifted, I found myself picking up brushes and letting the colors flow. I also started spending more time with my friends, people who had been there for me when I needed them. I had always kept them at arm's length, thinking that my family had to come first. But now I realized that real support didn't come from family alone. It came from people who saw you for who you were, not just what you could do for them. Still, I couldn't ignore the fact that my relationship with my mom was in shambles. I hadn't spoken to her since our argument. I knew that the wound was too fresh for us to talk yet, but I wondered how long it would take before the silence became unbearable. A few weeks later, I got a call from James. I stared at the phone for a few moments before answering. My heart rate spiked and I felt a surge of anger rise in me, but I swallowed it down. Ashley, his voice was cautious, like he knew this conversation wasn't going to be easy. Mom asked me to call you, she wants to talk. I didn't know what to say. My first instinct was to tell him off, to finally say all the things I had kept buried for so long, but something inside me held me back. I don't know if I'm ready to talk to her, I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. I need time, James. He was silent for a long time. When he spoke again, his tone was softer. She's really sorry, she didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't know what to make of that. Was he really speaking on her behalf, or was he just trying to guilt-trip me into forgiving her? Part of me wanted to believe that things could be fixed, that we could go back to the way things were, but I knew that wasn't possible. I'll think about it, I said, ending the call without giving him the satisfaction of more words. In the weeks that followed, I found myself thinking more and more about my mother. The guilt started to creep back in, but it didn't have the same hold over me. I had done the best I could. The phone didn't ring for a while after that, but one day, out of nowhere, my mom left a message. It was short, simple, and full of regret. I don't know if you'll ever be ready to talk to me, but I just want you to know that I love you. I always have. I'm sorry for everything. I listened to the message over and over, but this time when I heard her voice, it didn't feel like I was drowning. It felt like a whisper from the past, an acknowledgement of what had been, but also an acceptance that things had changed. I didn't call her back, not yet at least, but I felt something shift inside me. Maybe one day we could rebuild, but for now I was okay. I had done the hardest thing I could do. I had walked away from a toxic cycle, and in doing so I had started to rebuild myself. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure: I was finally living my life for me.